and then to this really interesting session, which basically human sensitive approach and this means community when it comes to AI. Useful view could be. So I think my name is Reema Patel. I have several roles and kind of the litigation and it's not. I don't really thinking for the year about the digital big network. And it's a really important time to be thinking about the role of community is that the future and our point of view. Several weeks. Most important is that when we're teaching to AI ultimately it's and it's really important not to lose sight of that. And I think we just published a report very quick up where the experts on what AI. And there's some two things which I think are really relevant to the page here. The first is support AI requires socio-technical approach. They're not just about technology, but about society relationship with technology. And the second thing that they staff was the AI concept itself needs to be negotiated in participatory, inclusive, and context-specific way. So I'm really delighted that we're focusing on this topic. And I know with great expertise in doing this, and we're talking about the topic. So I will introduce them. So we've got Dr. Abigail Gilbert. Would you say a little bit more about the work you do? The Institute of Work.
Sure. So the Institute for the Future of Work thinks about how we can design technology in a way that will build a fairer future through better work over the course of this particular transition.
And I'm sure that's very helpful. Because I've been seeing Andrew Pakes, prospect. Do you say a little bit quickly about prospect?
I think that means on. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Pakes. I'm one of the Deputy General Secretaries at the Prospect Trade Union. I help convene our future work in this area. So looking at both how AI and technology is changing how we work and manage, but also building power and bringing together workers who work in AI and digital technology themselves to give them and help them find voice over some of the changes in this new industry.
Brilliant. And we've got Jeni Tennison from Connected by Data. A few words about Connected by Data.
Yeah, I'm Jeni Tennison. I'm from Connected by Data. It's a campaign to give a powerful community voice around data and AI. And we work on narratives and practices and policies around that.
Thank you. And then we've got Luke Elgar from the Communication Workers Union. So over to you.
Yes, Luke Elgar. As you said, Communication Workers Union. We deal with, we have members from both British Telecoms, but my best knowledge is my background, which is Royal Mail, and what I was contributing on today is basically around the real-time recording of postal workers, delivery workers across the UK, and how this is starting to stem into a big concern for us, which I'll allude on.
Brilliant, thank you, and thanks also for being very tight. Our colleagues have got 5 minutes to give us a provocation on some of these questions. Why is it important to engage workers in communities on AI? How can we do that? What are the barriers? How can we overcome the barriers? What is the role of government and industry? So I will start with Abigail. So over to you, and then we'll go through perspectives from everyone, and then we'll turn to questions. Abigail.
Great, thank you, Email. So I start by saying it's great to join this panel and great to be talking to you about this today. So I suppose to come to this first question on why, it's the case that in previous waves of industrial transformation, they've entrenched regional inequality across the country, and there's significant evidence that that's happened, especially with the particular context of the UK, with those inequalities being significantly sharp. And in a recent survey that was conducted as part of the PISA-READS review into the future of work and wellbeing, which is generously funded by the Nuffield Foundation and led by Professor Jared Hayden, who gave us this space today, but unfortunately can't be here, he found that there is a potential that with the adoption of AI, these particular regional inequalities become even further consolidated. And this is because as managers adopt these technologies, they're more likely to adopt them in ways that erode job quality or delete jobs where they are located in labour markets that have lower innovation readiness, as we looked at it, which is a kind of a proxy for local labour market characteristics. So what this might mean is that this particular wave of adoption that happens now serves to further entrench particular geographic inequalities that we can already see. And this is a real invitation to think about work in the context of communities and understand adoption practices within firms as they relate to their broader place-based context, which obviously has implications for governance and regulation. To come to the third question, second, around barriers, I suppose a key issue is that we often recognize the need for greater participation in governance, and this is often used to refer to citizens. Workers aren't often conceived in the same, citizens are workers. Most of us have to work, but people aren't conceived in relation to their role as workers in a way that means that they should have a say and a voice over things, and with that same kind of democratic spirit. And one of the ways that this plays or is significant in relation to these issues of local transformation also relates to the way that our local state is structured. So at the moment, regeneration through planning is the main way that the local state understands how it can shape the economy. And that's because it's something that it has power over. But in some work that we've done, which has looked at transformations, for instance, to Grimsby and Bristol, where we've looked at new futures of work which had been imagined from elsewhere, there was no engagement with people as workers around what that new future would look like. And then there was a significant mismatch between what their desires and expectations were and how much it actually offered them as a kind of reality. Secondly, there's a lack of collaborative architecture for workers' voices being represented in the policymaking process. And this is something I strongly suspect that my co-panelist will talk to you more later, given a recent report that he's done with a research fellow of ours, Harry Pitt, so I won't say more on that now. And then thirdly, I think a major barrier is that firms and organizations still don't understand the point and the benefit of doing this. But there's abundant research that suggests that at the level of firms, engagement can improve productivity by around 14%. And this is partly because if you speak to workers, they often understand how a process will function in a way that means that you can deploy technology in a way that it actually delivers benefits for your organization. But also the buy-in that you garner from people, the retention of them, and also their motivation can deliver benefits for the organization. So I suppose that kind of the key barriers there. So what do we do to overcome this? And what's the how of how we get this better state of involvement? Well, at the Institute, we're particularly interested in the firm and as a kind of unit of this transformation where these decisions and adoption practices begin. And we have developed a kind of architecture for engaging workers in these processes of design, review and iteration of these technologies, which is also a guidance for organizations on thinking critically about how to adopt, procure, and then implement these kinds of technologies. And we call this good work algorithmic impact assessment. And if anyone's worked on impact assessment projects, they'll know that makes it sound wholly underwhelming. But it is kind of also this, this sort of process to imagine and redesign these potential futures for our relationships with each other within the workplace. And we've understood how to engage workers in that context through different methodologies which reflect democratic principles. So one would be kind of selecting from the workforce through a representative sample, kind of using sortition, identifying who the relevant stakeholders are that might be impacted, selecting from that group and involving them on that basis. Or obviously elective, wherever there is a union, they should absolutely be involved. This is unfortunately not the case across all workplaces, and therefore we do need these other processes to be identified to engage people, but it could be work councils. And then also, provided that the scale of the organisation is adequate, direct, where you engage all of those different workers that may be impacted in that process. So the kind of deployment context is one, that firm level context for the how with Good Work AIA. But then also in place, we need, at the moment, the place-based narrative around futures of work still focuses on the match. Who has what skills, where are they, and where should they be? We need to go beyond this to think about what's making good work and good jobs. And we think that probably something that could help there is the development of local place-based future of work strategies. How we get to that requires a conversation firstly about devolution, but then also about different devolved powers to make sure that those kind of instruments can have teeth to design the futures that people want.
Thank you. Submission on that. That's not working. So anyway, hopefully, thank you very much. Great set of information and lots to be thinking about and place-based approach here. Lots to be thinking about in terms of, I suppose, what you were describing in the public, and also more structured approaches to work engagement within the workforce or the employee setting is also really helpful to have summary. Andrew, I want to turn to you next for your information between your mind is working, is it?
I think so. Brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant. Over to you.
Cool. So we all asked to give you some provocation. So here's my provocation for you. And it's nice to be with you this afternoon. It's nice to be an event which is centering around work and the experience of work within this kind of fiesta of AI we're all talking about. So my provocation is that we will ultimately fail to get this wrong and fail to achieve the benefits that technology could bring us if we don't address what I call the 3 Ps. And that's people, place, and power. And what strikes me as the biggest example of how you get that wrong, if I'm honest, is look who's at Bletchley Park this week. There is no conversation about power. There is no conversation about place. There is no conversation about people. And we will have some great press releases. There will be some amazing choreography of diplomacy going on. But ultimately, we will get 6 months down the line and nothing will have changed in terms of the substance. And that's the real challenge. And I understand the diplomatic pressure and the pressure to have these big moments, but rarely does change come from a single moment. It comes from evolving something in it. And to me, that's how we need to get the debate forward. So another one of my reflections, I grew up about 2 miles away from Bletchley Park. My family had come from Milton Keynes and predecessors a long time for it. What struck me talking to my mum was when Bletchley Park was doing its thing, predominantly with a woman-based workforce, not just the men we see on telly talking about Bletchley Park, no one knew about it. Its history was completely hidden. You can see why, because some of the secrecy. When I grew up, I knew nothing about Bletchley Park because still it was covered by the secrecy. And in fact, I find it really fascinating now seeing this great history of Bletchley Park, somewhere where I grew up, and knowing nothing about it. It was completely divorced from the everyday lives of those of us who lived around it. And that's my big fear about how AI is being treated and how the summit's getting to, that this discussion about AI will again be divorced from the rest of us and what happens. And unless we center or anchor some of these debates in the work particularly Luke and I do as trade unionists, but many of you do in this room, on the everyday experience of technology, how it impacts our lives, how it affects our sense of identity, how it addresses the kind of security and comfort with change that we all experience, then again, we're going to fail to get some of that wrong. I noticed yesterday as part of this, there was a big conversation about 185 million, I think mostly re-announced money for skills, which focused largely on the global talent, the AI leaders in this world. And that may be fine for an upstream conversation, but we never get to the downstream conversation about the rest of us. Because if this money is about the AI talent, and that's what the country needs, does that mean the rest of us aren't the talent? This is, again, where you get language and narratives going about. It's like there's a moonshot of people who may save us, but the rest of us don't get into it. And that translates into, I think, the work we do, which is, for most of our members, we see technology already transforming their lives, both the jobs they do through some job loss and augmentation, but also through management and HR, people analytics, surveillance software that CWU, you're doing brilliant work, as are GMB and other unions, resisting and trying to put a human element into it, which is transforming people's work experiences. But then you also get this whole augmentation of it. And that's the barrier. The barrier really, Reema, is that this is a conversation about social change, economic change, and our economic model. And unless we locate technology as a means to the change we're having, if we get this idea of tech exceptionalism, if we think the tech is so exceptional to anything we've ever experienced in our history or lived experience, then it becomes something only other people can discuss. And it doesn't. So the good example I said earlier, and then I will bring it to a close, is, I live in a city now, Peterborough, which has a really proud industrial engineering past. Over the last decade, we've seen the growth of warehousing, call centres, and other type jobs replace it. We all know through technology in the next 3 to 5 years, at least half of jobs in call centres will disappear. Largely from a consumer perspective, we hope that will be a better experience when we're trying to get through to the right person. If you regard it purely as a tech and AI conversation, the conversation has a logic, something better for consumers and something which is more effective for businesses. But if it's only a tech conversation, you don't have the second half of that, which is what happens to those people. And one of our big dangers, which is why place is important for people, which is if technology and AI means that people can invest and do jobs just about anywhere, we don't have the conversation about work which is somewhere. and the idea of industrial policy and economic policy. And I like some of the stuff Abby's talked about, but I think some of this is also just about relearning old lessons. We need a proper industrial strategy in this country. We need a sense of social partnership where businesses who are largely good in this space and employees and workers can come together and solve some of these challenges together. And if people say that's fanciful, in large parts of Europe, in large parts of the world, that happens. Even in the United States. Isn't it amazing that in the week of our AI summit, President Biden blew the summit out of the water with the most comprehensive executive order on AI I have seen today. Now, we can argue whether that will be implemented, but something centered on all of our roles as human beings who live in communities, human beings as work, as relate to each other, access healthcare and public services, who care about inequality, care about disparity in their life experiences, in one document, which is largely the opposite of what we might get from this week. Was that provocative enough?
It was.
Thank you.
Well done. I'm especially struck by the story you told about Ashley Park. And one of the things that really struck me was the way technology was developed. You know, if you think about the process of development of technology, there is a question that I'm now asking from your story, which is, have we unquestioningly taken that approach and baked that into, because it's so important to us and our national history, have we unquestioningly just taken that approach and baked that into the way we now think about it? So do we need to think that was appropriate for that time, but now we need a different approach? So yeah, I was really struck by that story. Okay, great. So next up is Jeni.
Cool. So I really agree with everything that's already been talked about. I think I'm going to try and focus on some things that are a little bit different, just to give a bit of contrast. And it's not because I disagree, or it's just because I don't want to be repetitive. So on why, I thought I'd concentrate on why, say, President Biden has signed an executive order that includes consultation with workers. There's the US Bill of Rights around AI that includes consultation with communities. Why would governments be interested in that? And I think one of the key things here is that because AI is so context dependent, how we use it is so context dependent, it becomes very, very difficult to regulate with high level kind of red lines around what it is that people should do. Very difficult for regulators to get into all of the places and be able to see all of the places in which AI gets used. And so we need to have accountability mechanisms that operate at the level of the workplace, that operate at the level of the school or the hospital or whatever, right? So really, for me, then engagement with workers and communities around the use of AI in the workplace is about making regulation in its broadest sense, as in regulating a system, not in its sense of like the legal regulation, making that practical, providing capacity at that local level, providing that context specificity, providing agility as well so that things can change over time. And I think there are two other upsides as well. There's a skills upside. When you start to talk to people about technology as it affects their lives, they start to understand technology better, right? It skills them up. So actually engagement helps with skills, and engagement helps, as we've already talked about, with trust and adoption, when it becomes something that people work with rather than something that they fight because they feel like it's working against them. And so having better engagement, I think, is a way of getting better trust and adoption in technology, and also getting the kind of productivity benefits that we might see. So from a government perspective, I think it really makes sense to try and push for more of this engagement at a local level in the workplace, right, in order to achieve those kinds of benefits. On the how, we've already talked about the kind of engaging with workers, and as I say, I think that that's crucial. But I think we also need to remember community engagement as well. So one of the things that Luke has talked to us about is how, you know, you're a postie and you go around and it's not just about delivering the mail, right? It is also about the interactions that you have with the people on your route. It's about bringing just a word of comfort to the old people who are lonely and don't see anybody else in their day, right? But this applies across the board, right? Call center customers you talked about. The customers will be impacted by the use of technology in the workplace just as surely as the workers will be. You think about technology in schools. It's not just teachers who are affected, it's also students, it's also parents. Think about supermarket tills. Like in all of these places, right, we as customers, as clients for these kinds of services also get affected by technology that is being rolled out. And so that means that I think that it's also important to bring in the voice of the customers, the clients, the communities that are affected when technology gets used in the workplace. And when you do that, then you find, obviously, there are also concerns about technology being used in ways that will then affect them. In particular, that we really value human contact, we value care, and we value humanity. And when that gets taken away through the adoption of technology, then that's a problem for us as customers and clients, as well as for workers as well. Anyway, so that's my pitch for let's also engage the communities who are affected as well as the workers. And as for barriers, I wanted to highlight a non-barrier that is often brought up. Often people talk about not being able to do proper consultation or engagement around technology because they're worried that the people they would consult with don't really understand it. That is not a barrier. Literacy is not a barrier to consultation. We can have an opinion on how technology and AI affects our lives without having to be developers of that technology, right? And so that is not a barrier and it's not an excuse. I think that there are some barriers though. I think we're not good at knowing how to engage, like what techniques to use. Right now we're running a mini public people's panel on AI, bringing together, a randomly selected set of people to discuss AI in general. But there's a whole bunch of techniques that you can use for engagement. It's not all about citizens' juries, and we should be experimenting with different kinds of techniques, I think, in order to bring those in so that we get better at that. I think there's a barrier that people feel around time and cost and delays. We've already talked about how actually the engagement smooths the path for an easy adoption of technology rather than one that is constantly being pushed back against. But I think the key barrier is one about openness, and there's always a real challenge around openness. And it's openness for organizations both to listen to workers and communities who are affected by data and AI, but also to be open and honest about the constraints that they're operating within, so that it turns into a dialogue that is about us working together towards a common kind of recognizing common kinds of problems and working together, rather than one that is always at loggerheads, like you're trying to do this to us and we're trying to resist it. I think that's where we could get to. So yeah, to summarize, I think there are good reasons for government to be pushing this as a policy. I think it's important to remember communities are affected as well as workers, and we should focus on this shared journey of transformation rather than antagonism all the time.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you. So it's about, focusing on the shared journey, but also at the beginning of your talk, you were talking about the importance of workers working with the technology or feeling the technology working with them rather than in opposition. That's a really interesting thought. What would it look like for a world in which we would see that dynamic? And it's early days at the moment, but there isn't quite as much discussion, it seems, about the development of societal skills around these and technology. So we've got the technologies, but there still needs to be more, it seems, that supports people to be able to use those technologies effectively. And it's kind of an interesting balance to strike. That needs to be both in design of the technology. Also, there's something about who ultimately is benefiting from them and how can they benefit from them and be supported to benefit from them. Okay. I wanted to remind people that we do have an opportunity for questions using Slido, and I'm sure that would feel very familiar to you all by now. So do drop your question in the Slido if you haven't yet already. So let's continue the conversation. Luke, what are your thoughts on some of the interesting thoughts and comments that have come up?
So firstly, thank you on behalf of postal workers and delivery workers in general for the opportunity to contribute to this debate today. I think what we've seen is the AI debate becoming prevalent in the media and in politics, but actually for us, from our perspective, it's something, well, certainly technology and automation of jobs is something we've dealt with for decades. And it's sort of now that it's replacing or threatening more skilled jobs, or as what people call more skilled jobs, it's now becoming more wider debate when actually we've dealt with parcel sorting machines that replace jobs by sorting thousands of parcels an hour. We've dealt with all sorts of technology coming into the industry. And the AI one and the real-time tracking, as I say, is the one that's really becoming prevalent for us today. So you'll recognise that all postal workers carry a scanner. You'll probably assume they scan a parcel and then you get a notification, or the person that sent it gets a notification confirming that it was sent. But the reality is the scanners that they hold are able to track them in real time. They provide the company with as much data as they can try and collect from it. So they measure, for example, algorithms are now being used to try and dictate the perfect route, basically measuring how many steps you do, how long it takes you to get up the steps, how long you spend at a doorstep, and all those different things. And what we're starting to see now is, rather than experience and the union being able to negotiate based on what's really achievable, savings targets, and sort of what the local people understand as what is an achievable route, they're trying to now create this scenario where they're using all that data to create a perfect round, so that whilst people might be incentivized to work faster because they might finish 20 minutes earlier or something like that, they're seeing that 20 minutes as a reward. And actually now the technology becomes the whip to make sure you're working faster, rather than incentivized or rewarded or just simply having job satisfaction. So as I say, these algorithms now are able to dictate, well, they're trying to use it to dictate. That's naturally, obviously, discriminative against anyone that has a disability, anyone that's older, even female, going through whatever females are dealing with, and so on and so forth, and all the different things. So the expectation is always, obviously, to try and aim for hitting the pace that a 25-year-old is hitting and new into the industry. And what actually this is creating is, I think what we're starting to see, and certainly in Royal Mail, is a recruitment and retention crisis. So we've seen it for some time now. We see it because when we try and recruit union members, we get the data of who's entered the industry, and then very quickly we're communicating that to our local reps. We're saying, have you managed to recruit that person? And they say they were in for 2 weeks, if that, and they left because they found it was a basket case. And the reason is because of obviously the delays we're seeing massively across the country, and all this is linked to this idea that they can create a perfect round and they don't have to negotiate with a trade union. It's still a culture that's massively embedded, which coming under the previous CEO, who was removed and actually has not gone with him because of the number of people he's brought in with him. But the reality is, as I say, the retention issue is becoming a major problem. The delivery of the mail is becoming a major problem, and actually delivering for the customers and doing all the things that Royal Mail need to do to survive and be a profitable company. So I think where the proof in the pudding is that actually when you incentivise a workforce and when you bring them on board, you will be a more successful company. And actually in trying to reduce terms and conditions and trying to create this technological whip, as I allude to, they're creating a massive problem, and it isn't having the desired effect. So where we're linking into now, what we're dealing with, and it was in our national agreement that we agreed, they were very keen to have a My Performance app also on this scanner. Now, the 3 KPIs, key performance indicators, that are on it aren't something that we would particularly shy away from, particularly be nervous from. Whether you scanned your items, driver safety and complaints from customers. So things you'd be approached on a day-to-day basis anyway. But what we're clearly starting to see now is that they want to link this to your productivity and how fast you are. And what we're seeing now is actually you also discriminated for how long you've been in the business because of wear and tear, because of other issues. So they're trying to create an idea where you keep bringing new people in. They don't like the sort of longer term posties and the people who know the area very well. But actually, again, it's another issue because someone who understands the area is better than as knowledge of it and actually can deliver around faster and particularly out on the vans, understanding the roads in the locality are, experience in any industry is obviously a massive benefit. And I don't think that Royal Mail appreciate that. I think they think that technology and your sat nav, for example, can dictate all this stuff without the need for experience. But actually, my friend at the back here, I was just talking to on the sound, alluded to exactly the same thing, where his postman in, I think it was Richmond, is being told to go up and down the same street twice when he's saying, I know the quickest route, but I'm being penalised for not taking that route. So, as I say, when you don't involve people into the debate, you create massive problems for yourself as a company. And actually, before the dispute that a very bitter dispute that we are trying to move away from now and have a national agreement around, but having the difficulties holding the company to that national agreement, is around all that. So I think what they're looking for is a continuous improvement culture, but actually it's creating a conveyor belt where you're not retaining staff, and those are all the issues around that. So as I say, when you don't bring your workforce with you, you create your own problems. And I think particularly with the data, when you don't involve people into the debate, you create that issue as well. And that's why, for the time being, whilst they're recognising that and they're starting to learn, I hope the new CEO is going to negotiate with us further on these issues. Before that, we had input to what went into the timings on the algorithms, so we understood them. So we knew exactly how long they were recording for you to go up a certain amount of steps, how long on a doorstep. But now they are trying to hide that data from us. And the real reason is because it's always humans that are putting in this data behind the scenes, and humans in a business world are always looking for savings, of course, but actually what it's creating is unrealistic targets. So it's a massive concern for us. It's going to be an ongoing concern, and I think it's creating a negative culture at work where, as I say, you have a sort of technological whip, which we want to move away from and actually bring people along with us on this whilst we introduce this technology. So thank you.
Thank you. And I think there's something really interesting in here about, the issues as you talk about them, workplace surveillance. It's the term that people use to describe this, but the sense that workers often have that they are not basically in control of the technology. The technologies are controlling them, and it's not unique to one industry. It's an issue across a number of industries, and it's really important when we're thinking about agency and control and what's exerting control and power. Actually, I was reading some really interesting work on well-being. There was a study conducted in America, and it illustrated that one of the largest contributors to well-being for American citizens at the time was not really anything other than their sense of agency and control. So when you think about agency and control, one of the reasons it matters is it matters so much for one's sense of well-being. So that's a really powerful intervention. Thank you very much. We do have quite good questions, actually. So we always have good questions. We have got one from Robin Carpenter, who is here. And Robin says, a challenge with wide engagement is it's self-unselection. Some people don't want to engage conversation, even after encouragement from community leaders. Should you push to represent such groups or continue the conversation without them, or something else? Is there anything else that we should add to that?
I should probably say that I'm coming from a medical context with this question, and also I appreciate it's a really, really hard question. I just really want to hear what opinions about the whole thing.
And Gina?
And just to add on, how do we lower those costs or barriers to participation?
Yeah.
Okay, and how do we lower the costs or barriers to participation? So that's the question. So I suppose what you're talking about is this participation gap. The cost of participation. It's yeah.
There's cost. There's also something they don't care. They don't want to be part of it.
Yeah,
which is fine, but isn't right.
Okay. So the few issues. One is around not everyone will want to participate equally. And then there might be barriers to participation. So it might be structural reasons for why people help. I suspect equally. What do we do about that in the context of this conversation? Who would like to answer that question? Yeah, Abigail?
Sorry.
I'm happy to pick up as well. So.
I mean, yeah, absolutely not wide enthusiasm. Just want I suppose just some first thoughts on how we approach this question in relation to the lines to the information questions of this on internal taking first, which is firstly to have a baseline of a series of commitments before you begin a engagement process that include things like ensuring that people are fairly compensated for their time and expected to work on this aside the time that they'll be participating in whatever this process was. Secondly, making it transparent what the terms of engagement are, which involves making it clear what we will make commitments to amend if someone gives their time to a process. It's similar to engagement practices. Often people think it's futile, so but once to engage because they don't need to be poignant. If you state before we begin something, what it is that someone can expect out of it, and that there will be actions taken if there are risks of a certain threshold identified, then that's the motivating counter. There's obviously also in the context of a workplace a fear of penalisation for critiquing what practices are, and this is why it's important we already have protected roles under both health and safety and union representatives who are not subject to those forms of or are protected from that kind of potential repercussions from speaking against a particular practice, which is why I think all the But I suppose there's also on this issue of representation, and noting that the impacts of algorithmic systems are greater for some research to slightly to some off by the. We did recommend that in the context of using sortationalist methodology of representation, then you did upgrade and allow for greater involvement of this communities. But it's also not fair to burden those communities with the responsibility to do that. And so it should be quite really as a choice, and then also be suggested that there's also a potential election of a representative to meet from those groups, various groups, felt it could represent them so that they didn't feel excessive burden because they got also was suffering into excessive costs.
I'm going to come to Jeni next on this question. The question after that, I will come to colleagues because I think it's very trade union specific. Jeni.
It's only a few things to just reinforce and add. I think looking at why people unselect themselves, I think is really important. And like I think there's often people feel that they've contributed before, but they've not been listened to as a community, right? It might not be them individually, but as a community that's happened before, and therefore unselect because it's not worth it. And so I think that's part of the authenticity part of needing to in these engagements. And you listed really well the kinds of things that you can do in order to set expectations and make sure that it is an authentic engagement in order to build that trust for better engagement in the future. I also think it's important to recognise that the perfect should not be the enemy of the good. It's better to have some representation from some people than it is to go for something that is perfect. And you should be. I think it's good to be conscious of where you might not have that full representation and why, but also how it might skew what the results are. And, you can do a bit of critical reflection on that without necessarily needing to have the people in the room, although obviously it would be better if you did. And just on the barriers, I think the thing I'd highlight is that there's lots of varying needs, right? And different kinds of people and communities need different things. And so it's not a kind of blanket, this is the kind of support that you have. Again, asking for what it is that you need for each of your participants, I think is really important.
Thank you. And so we'll try and say something about, basically, this is the question. It would be good to hear ideas of how this new tech could tangibly improve lives. And if we are going to see a bump in automation and productivity, then why not adopt a shorter working week to save jobs, improve staff retention and meet the mental health crisis, etc. A traditional union demand, ... So the question is, if tech is going to be more productive and generate increased productivity, why are workers seeing the benefits of that? Yeah. As a section.
All right.
I think that there's studying every young next.
So I picked up on the point of improving lives. I mean, sort of the technology. Firstly, I'll say is the reason why we don't shy away from any technology in general is because it improves the lives of customers in particular. Because, for example, some of the technology I've spoken about earlier actually, it is able to give you a more accurate time of when you expect a delivery, whatnot, what to do if you're not going to be, and so on and so forth. And particularly on the 4-day week topic, it's a big one in our union. We fight hard for innovative duty patterns. Obviously, to achieve that, you need to look at shorter working week. We had an agreement just 2 years ago before this major dispute, and we've just moving away from, hopefully, which committed us to move into a 35-hour working week with no loss of pay, and that's an introduction of technology and so on and so forth. We now operate a 37-hour week, and during the height of the dispute, the new HR director ripped up that for all new entrants and put them back to 40-hour working week. So a major commitment at the moment is focused on harmonising those terms and getting everyone onto the same, which is 37, not 40. But we remain committed in our current agreement that it's joint aspiration, as much more so our aspiration than the company's, but a joint aspiration to move to a 35-hour working week. So again, it's a massive one for us. We believe it's massively important for productivity because a short working week gives you recovery time, particularly as a postal worker. When you're working 8 to 10 miles a day, you're covering 5 days a week or more. You need that respite, and if you do have that respite, you're going to be able to walk a bit faster, perhaps. So, again, if everyone's engaged in a debate, we strongly believe that it's in the interest of the company and our employees, our members. But at the moment, I think there's unfortunately a big culture encouraged, I'd say, by the government to not engage with trade unions and actually see us as sort of mad. We don't really understand. We're not business people, so what are you talking about? But eventually, it swings around in circles, and they realise they benefit from engaging with us.
Andrew.
See, look, the reality of my job and working with lots of our reps is we struggle to get people only to do the hours they're paid for at the moment. So I want to get to things like a 4-day week and seeing some of those benefits, but the amount of unpaid overtime and our always-on culture, often inspired by the technology that allows us to be connected, means how many of us are still doing emails on a Friday night? How many of us still have employers or managers sending stuff through as they're switching off because they're working then, and then you feel pressured to work at that point. So we know unpaid overtime and work culture is a really important part of this conversation. And I think that comes to the bigger question of what kind of discussion do we want to have about technology, productivity in this country? Because actually we've had a really lousy work culture in this country for a long, long time. Predates all this stuff around AI. If you look at our near competitors who are more productive, there are clear benefits that people get within that. Our main competitors tend to be more productive, work fewer hours, have higher levels of union recognition, but also really important for this, have higher levels of adoption of new technology. And you don't need much empirical evidence to get people on the shop floor, whatever that shop floor is, might have some knowledge and insight into production processes or customer service, which isn't held by those people in C-suite who don't provide the level of service. So actually the conversation I think we want to have is how do we create a sense of partnership in this so that we all see a future? Because we know from any other previous bit of economic change we've had, where it has gone wrong is when people haven't seen their future, whether that's a community having development imposed on them or service change imposed on them, or workers feeling that, again, we are put upon. Stuff is done to us, not with us. And I think there's a real opportunity to use some of this technology to actually reach out to people in different ways. So that in that previous question about how do you engage people, we have deliberative software. We have the ability for people to find out when they're working in different workspaces, or if they're working different shift patterns or working more flexibly. Technology can make people feel part of a group, a sense of a work identity, which we didn't have before if people are off-site at different times. So there is potential in this technology to actually make people have a better sense of well-being and identity, but it needs to be done with people. And I think that's the ultimate question that Luke and I try and address. How do our members and their co-workers get a sense of they're at the table when these things are discussed and decisions are made?
Thank you. And we still have 2 more questions, so don't head off just yet. We've got a question from Gilbert. Should tech builders be better connected with those who use it or are impacted by it? Do you think unions in big tech can contribute to meaningful change? What I might do is split that into 2, if that's okay. The first is, should tech builders be better connected with those who use it or are impacted by it? And I'm going to ask Jeni to speak to that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, there should be better connection between the people who are developing technology and the people that are affected by it. There needs to be that we need a new profession really within technology development companies that are all oriented around engagement with, and it can build off, existing professions like UX. I think the other thing is that we need to have better union representation. I think this is the second part of the question, better union representation within tech companies and better protection for the people who are working within tech companies, and including whistleblower protection, in order to get to better technology use.
And then the second part of that question was, do you think unions in big tech can contribute to meaningful change? And that's, I suppose, to add to that, how? I'm going to ask Abigail, and then Luke, and then Andrew to speak to that.
I think I'll pass to Luke.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll still writing down the questions. So it's microphone. So look, in truth, it's a difficult one for me to answer with my knowledge. What I do know is that we've our fastest, whilst we have difficulty recruiting at the moment because of retention issues in my industry, our fastest growing part of my trade union is UTOR branch, which is allied and tech workers. So in truth, I rolled over here to try and answer the techie arguments in that regard, but it's clear for me that is growing. I mean, literally 80% in a year. Membership in that branch is our fastest growing function in the trade union, and we're trying to learn from them why they're so successful at recruiting, even though we've been doing, perhaps some of the people around me in my sector have been doing it a lot longer. So it's not the answer you wanted, but it's positive in my respect, in my regard, that there are people grasping this issue.
Andrew.
Yeah. Absolutely. Big tech are some of the biggest global power corporations in the world, and it's really important. I think we can touch this on the next session. Some of the global partnerships we're in with sibling unions in other parts of the world, again, using this new technology to share how some of these big tech companies have very different behaviors in different countries based on labor laws, social standards in that, and how do we raise those standards within that. That we represented most of the Twitter workforce in the UK, where on Christmas Eve last year, Elon Musk sent an email saying they were sacked and locked them out of their system. We had to take action in that, because it turned out, who knew? Elon Musk thought people who worked in the UK had the same labour laws you have in California, because no one had really thought what actually happens on it. So we're really pleased that such a great employer has been invited to have a photo opportunity with the Prime Minister today, given he is a paragon of good virtue and good work. But definitely, if we're going to define, these are big corporations as well as technology companies. There should always be a leveler in that in terms of voice and social justice. But that, if it's made, that's upstream where coders and designers. I think we need very much specific upstream stuff. I really welcome Institute Future Work stuff around how do we create accountability in algorithms. I think there's also downstream impacts, those of us who are affected by this technology, and where do we fit into it? And that's got to be about skills, how the rest of us get the skills to adapt to change, and why we talk about a digital transition that we need in the way that we talk about a just transition into low carbon technologies. We need a digital transition. So the workforce as a whole, 2/3 of us, or 2/3 of our 2033 workforce are already in work. So there is no route to having a productive digital AI-driven economy in this country that doesn't deal with adult skills. There just simply isn't. You can train as many youngsters coming through school as you want, but we will fail as a country unless we give adults, often in precarious, low-paid work, the ability to learn and be part of making this AI-driven world a success for them, rather than just for the bank balance or shareholder value. And that's a real challenge because it's bigger than just AI in terms of doing that. But equally, we need AI algorithm management, but we also need it for the rest of it. And yet, most companies in this country, well, let's frame it this way. One of the reasons we have some of the safest workplaces in the world, in this country, is that we already have a health and safety regime which involves workers. We have a just culture of safety in workplaces. Even where there aren't unions, there are workforce and workplace committees where workers get a sense to blow the whistle, have those conversations, check that people are kept safe, and we reduce accidents on that base. Managing risks, reducing harms. That's what we need with AI and technology. We need the stuff around the algorithms and those things around some of those particular problems, but we need to manage risks and reduce harms. We know how to do it. We just need employers and others to put the mechanism in place to allow workers to be part of those conversations.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think that all